on the Nature of Philosophy. This is the English version of a talk delivered at the University of Macerata under the invitation of Professor Francesco Riglia. The question, what is philosophy, is itself a philosophical question. The striking property of philosophical questions is that they have no decisive answers. As Bertrand Russell said as he compared philosophy with science, science is what we know, philosophy is what we do not know. Science is what we can show to be true, philosophy is what we cannot show to be false. This brings the philosophers to a somewhat embarrassing situation, since we cannot even be sure about what we are trying to do, so that we can easily go astray. To begin with, we can easily divide the contents of philosophy, the attempts to explain what philosophy is, in two kinds. One, the prescriptivist approaches, trying to show what philosophy should be. Two, the descriptivist approaches, trying to understand what philosophy has been. Prescriptivist approaches look to the future, belonging to a philosophy or philosophical movement or trend. Examples. Carnap suggested that philosophy should be the investigation of the logical syntax of scientific language. For Heidegger, philosophy should be the science of the beginnings of being, which is being in itself. For Wittgenstein, it should be a therapy against the bewitchment of our understanding by means of language. Some have produced well-succeeded trends. Examples. The epistemological turn originated by Descartes, challenging the priority of metaphysics. The linguistic turn, promoted mainly by Frege, Russell, and Wittgenstein, also was well-succeeded. Descriptivist approaches can be found in didactic tests or even in philosophers. For instance, C.D. wrote, "Philosophy is the search of a general view of the world and of man's place in it." This fits well with traditional systems from Plato to Hegel. G. Moore said, "Philosophy, under other things, is an attempt to give a description of the largest classes of things in the universe and the ways they are related to one another." This seems to fit well to metaphysics and ontology. Or still, Wilfrid Sellars, the aim of philosophy, broadly understood, is to understand how things in the broadest sense of the term hang together in the broadest sense of the term. Although these were senses held in the old tradition, they are maybe too much forgotten in the fragmented philosophy of the present days, as we will see. My aim here is to develop a descriptivist, external characterization of philosophy restricted to its sense in academic philosophy from the tradition to the present days. Before doing this, I wish to get a look at the concept of philosophy as of the analytic philosopher language, since it seems that analytic philosophers have changed the object of philosophy from the world to concepts. We learn that analytic philosophy of language had as its goals to analyze our conceptual structures. Strawson, for example, defined his descriptive metaphysics as a description of our actual structures of thought. A very clear definition of the central interests of analytic philosophy comes from Ernst Tugendhat. Philosophy, he says, is the analytic elucidation of the network formed by the concepts constitutive of our understanding of the world. According to him, we learn our concepts implicitly by means of positive and negative examples, not by means of explicit definitions. For this reason, we do not gain awareness of the conceptual rules of our language, which remain tacit. For example, definition of chair. What's a chair? By definition is a non-vehicular seat with backrest made for only one person to sit at each time. It's all here, but I will not consider, or not explain the possible exceptions, and so on. But you can find something almost like this in the Merriam-Webster dictionary. Philosophical examples are of much more complex concepts. Example, Agostine, what is time? When asked if I know what it is, I know. When asked me what is time, I don't know anymore. Another example, definition of propositional knowledge as justified true belief. This leads on to Gettier problem. Example 3. What's truth? Theories of truth. Example gratia, correspondence. What kind of correspondence? Structural isomorphism. Now, how to define it more precisely? What's the role of coherence here? Maybe a complementary one. Historically, this is from Armstrong, there are two kinds of analytic philosophy. A. Philosophy of ideal language inspired by Freudian logic, example earlier Wittgenstein, Russell, Wiener, Kreis, and B. Philosophy of ordinary language inspired by careful examination of our uses of words. This is later Wittgenstein, Oxford School, particularly Austin. However, it's better to formulate this distinction as that of A. Formally inspired philosophy. This will include also Davidson, Kripke, and so on. Versus B. A pragmatically inspired philosophy, which includes Searle, Grice, Tugendhat, Habermas, and to some extent Recanati. This would be an actualization of Armstrong's division. John Searle said that his art of doing philosophy is more powerful. Why more powerful? Well, I understand it as meaning that a pragmatically oriented philosophy is more comprehensive, because pragmatics must include semantics, which must include syntaxis, and the logical semantics, not only Freudian, but also others. In semiotics, syntaxis studies the relation between signs, semantic studies the relation between signs and their reference, while pragmatics studies the relations between speakers and hearers. But in order to be understood by the hearer, the speaker must order the words syntactically and in semantically appropriate ways. The result is the wideness of the pragmatic approach, at least in the hands of Searle or Habermas. If you get a look at the Universal Pragmaticus from Habermas, and will be surprised. Typical of philosophy is the formal way of speak in which we highlight linguistic conceptual structures. Examples: Wittgenstein, atomic states of affairs are a combination of objects wholly devoid of complexity and indestructible. Armstrong, scientific laws are relations of nomological necessity holding between universals. These universals must be attached with their instantiations in the world. Kripke, the reference of a proper name is given by a causal historical chain that begins with the baptism of its bearer in the world. Objection from Brian Magee. A notable objection. Philosophy cannot have as its object only concepts, meanings. It must also deal with the world, as traditional philosophy did. Answer from Ayer. The distinction between is about the world and is about the language isn't at all sharp, because the world is the world as we describe it, the world as it figures in a system of concepts, and exploring our system of concepts, we are at the same time exploring the world. I give reason to Ayer, and Quine gave the best answer. The pervasive characteristic of analytic philosophy is what he calls semantic assent. By means of semantic assent, conceptual aspects of our expressions are focused in order to make fine distinctions, explicit and to prevent linguistic confusions. Example, what are numbers? What's the meaning of sentences containing numbers? This is semantic assent. Example, the world is made of facts, not of things. You can say the concept world is so understood that by means of it a system of facts, not of things, is referred to. Semantic assent is reminiscent of Carnap's formal way of speaking. The difference is that semantic assent is applicable everywhere. Example, there are wombats in Tasmania. Wombat is implied. Wombat is true of some creatures in Tasmania. Well, we don't need to do it. If there is any point in it, the difference, Quine says, the example is from Quine, is that the semantic assent is more useful in philosophical connections, and that is all. Indeed, we could do the same with sciences. Einstein was analyzing the concept word of simultaneity when applied to observers moving at great relative speeds. Hawking made an important analysis of the concept of black holes. The concept of natural evolution was first rightly analyzed by Charles Darwin. Mendel analyzed the concept of gene, while Watson and Crick analyzed the concept of DNA. Although this is completely unnecessary, the conclusion is that, apart from some new methodological devices like the application of symbolic logic, the attention to the pragmatics, the use of modal logic, and other methodologies, analytic philosophy of language does not distinguish itself from traditional philosophy. We could make it clear saying that in doing philosophy we use semantic meta-language and not syntactic meta-language. Consider the contrasting examples. Krakow is a name word with 6 letters. Krakow is a word naming a city located 50 degrees north of the equator and 20 degrees off the meridian of Greenwich. In B, we use semantic meta-language by means of which we speak not only about words, but about what words mean, and in this way, indirectly, even about the world itself. Moreover, we can say that the traditional philosophy also did conceptual analysis. For instance, Plato's typical question in his dialogues had the form, what is X? Where in the place of X was a concept word like justice, knowledge, good, and so on. Example, in the dialogue Thetetus, knowledge is analyzed as true belief with a logos, a reason, a justification. This analysis was fully accepted until 1963 with Getty's problem. Conclusion: there is no distinct object proper of philosophy as conceptual analysis. Hence, one could compare the emergence of analytic philosophy with the post-Aristotelian philosophy during the Middle Ages. They have absorbed the Aristotelian organon, which comprised a theory of proposition, a theory of deductive reasoning, syllogistic, remarks about the nature of science, a sketch about inductive reasoning, a classification of fallacies, and so on. and all that stuff was assumed in the Middle Ages as belonging to the art of argumentation, the dialectics. Hence, analytic philosophy does not show a new object of philosophy. It is the same philosophy in a new form and therefore not a privileged place for the investigation of the nature of philosophy. If we wish to investigate the nature of philosophy, we need to search somewhere else. This is the first part.